Hello, I'm Bookface. Here's a point that's been brought up multiple times online because it's fascinating. Now, it's something that's easy to forget due to the gentle and majestic nature of these creatures, but horses are really big and potentially really dangerous. I mean, even though they're completely nice enough creatures, they still cause a lot of injuries. You respect horses, or horses will disrespect your life. Just a general rule of thumb. And considering that's how you have to look at a horse when, they eat grass and let you ride on top of them sometimes, that raises the question, how terrifying would it be if horses were predators instead of prey? Now, this is a very intimidating concept and also a pretty decent idea for a horror movie. I'd love to see the carnivorous horse apocalypse. I actually would. That would be really cool. Sci-fi, do it. You don't have a lot of standards when it comes to your concepts. This one's actually cool. But this is also a very fascinating question in reference to theoretical biology and alterations to history. Because the addition of a very, very large predator present in various parts of the world would probably have a really massive impact on human events and history. So let's see what this small-ish change would do for the course of history, or horstory. Oh god, I didn't even write that one down. I just thought of that. So to start out, we need to see the cousins and ancestors of modern horses to see how this change could generally be applied. Because keep in mind, while we are trying to make the horse a carnivore, we can't just put sharp teeth on it and say, yep, that's predator. Essentially, we have to somehow change that little thing and see what that would do to its overall structure, anatomy, everything. So first off, we go with ancestors. So the oldest known ancestor to horses is Hyracotherium. And from there forward all the way to modern horses, I couldn't find any direct ancestors that ate meat. So, yeah, it's a bit of an issue. I guess it would be pretty underwhelming if I just went back, found carnivorous horse ancestor, and just be like, yeah, they look like this. Pretty cool, right? I mean, that would still be pretty cool, but not nearly as interesting as this giant think piece I'm writing. Oh, by the way, in case you hadn't already guessed, this is going to be a really long video. Actually, you probably didn't have to guess because there's timestamps. Anyways, I'm just preparing myself, I guess. So because of this little fact, I had to find the closest sort of cousin or related species to the horse that I could vaguely use as an outline. Because while I could just generally change details, it would help if I had a baseline of what that could or would likely turn into from related creatures. And that didn't help much at first because most of the cousins of equines also share their herbivorous nature. Yes, I love pretentious script writing me who wants to use these big words. I'm making this video off of a Tumblr post. I don't know. Why am I trying to be all fancy? So I had to go to a different class of creatures altogether. I don't think it's actually a class on the evolutionary pyramid thing, this thing. So it was a different one of these. Yeah. And from there I went from odd-toed ungulates to even-toed ungulates, which means very little to me, but it's essentially hoofed creatures and how many toes those hooves are divided into. This is also the point where I realized, so horses don't have feet. They just have one massive toe that they run on. That's kind of horrifying, but also really interesting, but still kind of cursed and horrifying. So I went to find the closest meat-eating cousins, and I found two that are fairly close in the basic terms of, the biological pyramid and whatever, but one's certainly closer than the other. Pause for a minute if you want to take a guess what these creatures are. Okay, so the first one isn't too far off. It's a pig, hogs in general, which technically are omnivores, but it'll work. And then the other one is whales, because whales actually do have a far back relationship to horses and ungulates in general. Now, as much as I really wanted to model a carnivorous horse after a whale, some sort of carnivorous whale, I think the pig is probably our better bet. And while we're not just trying to turn the horse into a pig, it is still a little tricky since, again, pigs are omnivores, not full carnivores, and that's what we're going for. But whatever, close enough. This is all nonsense science anyway, so I don't think it really matters how technical I'm getting. Though ironically enough, if we did just go in this, then whales would actually be the better option because there are at least some fully carnivorous whales and some prehistoric ancestors to whales that were full large carnivores, not not just eating plankton, filter feeding, but like big old teeth, munch on the dinosaurs kind. But no, we're gonna go with pigs because that makes a little more sense in my mind. My smooth brain only understands horse to pig. It's the only translation that fits. I need that feature in Google Translate. I don't know what just happened there. I think I kind of lost my mind for a second. And guess what? I'm only like a fraction of the way through this script, so buckle up. So next we go to the speculative evolution of these creatures, also known as the fun part, right? Horses in general are pretty well-evolved creatures because, that's the reason they're still alive. If they weren't well-evolved creatures, guess what? They'd be dead, like the other horses. But their evolution would have to be far different if they were a predator rather than an herbivore. There's some obvious ways, but also some less obvious ways. But the general fact of the matter is, the way evolution occurs is it prefers things that are effective, and the things that aren't effective usually die out. Just general natural selection. So because of that, if we wanted this creature to exist, it would have to be as efficient as possible. And quite simply, the general structure and everything else about a horse just isn't particularly efficient as a predator. It's efficient as a large herbivore, so let's see how they change. One thing equines are generally recognizable for is having long heads and long old necks. Oh, why the long face? Except he doesn't have a long face, he just kills you. Now, the reason the neck is long is for means of balance. So this wouldn't really change unless, of course, this particular branch of evolution would drastically change the size and weight distribution of this creature. Yeah, that'd sure be weird. Okay, so far it still has its long neck. The head, however, is only long for the sake of assisting in grazing, giving it a lot more molars in the back to grind up grass, and so if it was instead predatory, it wouldn't need this. So its face would probably be notably shorter. Keep in mind, when I say it would become shorter, I mean the fact that it never would have elonged. It never would have evolved into its elongated state in the first place. It would essentially just keep a shortened face. Because I know, just imagining a horse transforming into this monstrosity is probably hard to imagine, but just imagine it just went a different path and never became a horse in the first place. Horses also have slender legs that are supported on singular toes, like I mentioned before, the kind of cursed detail that those are just giant toes. Now, this is helpful in causing them to be much faster, which would seem like a distinct advantage as a predator or as prey. So the legs could stay the same, but there are things to consider about how the horse moves specifically. So this may still possibly have to change, actually. Now, while the logic could obviously be applied, if it's faster to escape predators, it's also useful for it to be faster so it can be faster than its prey. But it isn't as good as you might think. There are different kinds of fast, and horses actually aren't built for speed necessarily. They are to a certain extent, but for the most part, horses are built for endurance. They're meant to run a lot longer and faster, which is why they're good transportation. Now, this isn't really helpful for a predator, though. Now, I didn't find a specific source explaining this, so I honestly could be wrong, but pretty sure the basics of it, since a carnivore's food isn't guaranteed, since, it can run away, it kind of has to be efficient with its energy. And if you have to endurance chase down your prey, then you're wasting a lot more energy than you might be getting. Like, sure, that's helpful if you chase down large, slow prey, but then you don't really need the speed to begin with. And if you're chasing down a small, quick piece of prey, like, say, a rabbit, well, then the energy you expend in chasing it down probably wouldn't be worth it in the end, and you'd have a net loss of energy. So instead, the horse would probably have to just have more general speed at the cost of a little bit of endurance. So there are different ways this could work, but this would likely just equate to having slightly thicker legs, and it would have probably a leaner build, per se. So, remember what I said back at the neck, where, it would have to change if the general structure changed any? Okay, so now we're going with shorter neck. Horses have large incisors for grazing and ridged molars in the back for grinding. Now this would change immensely, partially because carnivores actually can't move their lower jaw side to side, so that grinding would be completely gone, so ridged molars would be pointless. And of course, as you could probably imagine, they'd probably gain significantly sharper teeth, a lot more tearing and cutting and gouging. Horses also have very long, erect ears. Now, I wasn't sure if this would have to change at all, because, obviously ears are helpful, but apparently fast predators grow significantly larger inner ears to help with the stability of their head, so another reason to have a shorter neck. And also the ears of predators usually point forward rather than outwards, similar to eyes, so those probably wouldn't change too terribly much visually, but internally they would significantly. And since we're on the topic, love those segues, the eyes. Horses actually have very good eyesight, so the eyes would likely just kind of stay roughly the same, but they would probably point forward rather than outward, as prey items have their eyes on the outside for more of a 360 view, whereas predators have more tunnel vision to focus in. Now, a horse's sense of smell is better than a human's, but not as good as a dog's. Now, since the sense of smell is very helpful in predators, this would probably increase. And considering we're using a pig as a guideline, well, these things would probably have a really good sense of smell, because pigs are ridiculously good at smelling things. I guess that's why pigs are known for smelling. A lot of horses or related species of equines, notably zebras, are known for having some stripy patterns on them. Now, these, interestingly enough, actually exist to deter insects because of some reason. I'm not sure why, but apparently that's what they do. These probably wouldn't have to change necessarily, but they also wouldn't really be as necessary, since I'm pretty sure the reason that they'd have these stripes is because they're idly standing around grazing. But if they're predators, they aren't very idle unless they're resting. These would probably be changed more of a camouflage kind of pattern, just to be more effective, if it even gained stripes at all. And back to the teeth for a second. Regular horses actually have canines and something called wolf teeth. And as for what that means, I don't know, but that's kind of worrying. Now, the canines and incisors, as we mentioned before, would probably get way more pronounced and very sharp. And they may even actually develop sort of tusks. Again, we're going back to the pigs. Now, this becomes a lot more likely when you consider that these would probably be an apex predator. And when you think of, what's that term? I mentioned it in my Komodo dragon video, I think. I want to say it's insular evolution, but that mostly has to do with islands. But I guess it just works with anywhere where there's one top predator. Anyways, essentially, when you have an apex predator, they don't necessarily need to work that hard to get their food. Their food's plentiful and nobody can stop them. So what they have to deal with instead is they have to fight for territory and potential mates, and therefore develop more qualities to fight each other rather than hunt down prey. And tusks would probably be very useful for this. And now we go on to changes in history, because even though it's kind of easy to forget all the very, very intense things that happen in history, horses in early history have a huge role. Their transportation, they help in labor, they're tasty sometimes, But generally, horses do have a close relationship with humans in their history, both in war, in peace, and just general activity. Horses are pretty important, even though they're less so today because we have machines, but Here's the big reason that people worry about what would happen in history if horses were carnivorous. What exactly would their diet be? More specifically, would humans be on that list? Would a horse eat a human if it had the chance? Spoiler, answer's not that good. Now, interesting thing that I found, because I was looking for a size comparison, apparently lions are actually almost the exact same size as a horse, which is also pretty terrifying. And this creature would probably have a mind, again, working from our basis, similar to a wild boar. And I haven't had the privilege of being around too many wild boars, but yeah, they're pretty crazy. These things could possibly be even crazier, or possibly more chill since they have less to worry about. But I don't know. And while large predators have whatever they'd want to eat as an option, they would probably go for larger prey in general to be more energy efficient. So in certain areas, we'd probably be fine. Areas with particularly large prey animals, ironically enough, probably related to the horse. But if there's any area that doesn't have as many particularly large animals, humans might be in a little bit of danger. That being said, when it comes to predators, it's not like they can't be domesticated. Think dogs and cats. So is it impossible to think that we could maybe domesticate these carnivorous horses and put them in generally the same role that they're in now? Probably not. So first thing to consider is, again, the temperament of this creature, which we went back to. Now, one of the reasons wolves were effective to domesticate is because they're pack animals. They're very emotionally tied and try to stick together. So if you can bond with them, then they have a strong tie to you. But if we're giving this even remotely the mind of a pig or a hog, Yeah, that ain't happening. And at best, they'd probably be very ornery per se, if not very, very ill-tempered. So even though they could potentially be domesticated in some form, like pigs, they would probably never be tame because pigs are crazy, man. That never changes. You gotta worry about the pigs. Oink oink. Now, this would essentially remove a lot of the horse's role in history in general. Because, right off the bat, even if they were nice and kind, they probably wouldn't be as good since they're not built for endurance anymore. They're built just for temporary speed. They also wouldn't be very helpful in, say, plowing land because, well, they're not very agreeable, as we mentioned, and just generally not the most helpful creatures. And even if they could be livestock, they probably be a lot more dangerous than most. And even if they weren't too much of a risk as livestock, there definitely wouldn't be enough reward because, so if you have livestock that can only eat meat and you want it for meat, again, net loss of meat there. Maybe you could see it as a delicacy, but it wouldn't be able to replace regular pigs in the modern day era in their role as livestock. So yeah, basically horses would become significantly more dangerous and lose all of their helpfulness, which is quite unfortunate. And depending on how much of a threat these horses are, that's honestly impossible to tell because, well, probably not impossible, but I'm not smart enough to figure it out because I'd have to research humans and I don't want to do that. It's quite possible that human settlements might actually tend to emerge in mountainous areas more to avoid these predators, which would probably operate best on flat terrain, similar to the way that human settlements tend to pop up around rivers and other sources of water because, water is pretty important. Or maybe we just slowly kill them off until we're actually more of a danger to them because humans suck. Woo! Even if, they're being eaten by horses. Okay, so that was a tiring video. Ooh, how long have I been recording? 26 minutes, my god. Yeah, I've almost sat down for half an hour talking about carnivorous horses using science terms that I only half understand. So if you like this little thing, this long video talking about if horses could eat people, let me know if you have any other big concepts like this, because, well, I do like the simple, hey, here's an animal, or hey, this thing happens in science, be entertained. I also like the big concepts, like actually having to do some real research of my own, not just regurgitating facts from definitely not Wikipedia. But yeah, for right now, I'm really tired and I'm probably just gonna go watch YouTube and be dumb for a little bit. If you like this video, please leave a thumbs up, comment down below, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!